How are you guys? Yeah, I heard that. Yes, a day off, right? Hope that you guys are going to have a great Thanksgiving week. If you don't know me yet, my name's Chris. I'm one of the pastors here. Hey, I want you to go into your memory vault, okay? I want you to think back to one of your first jobs that you ever had. What was one that you got paid for, by the way? What was one of your first jobs that you ever had that you got paid for? Have you thought about it? On the count of 3, I want everybody to shout your job at me, and hopefully I'll hear a couple of them, okay? 1, 2, 3. Do it again. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I don't know what jobs you had, but I know that you had one, right? Every once in a while, I can usually hear 1 or 2 when I do those kind of things, but do you remember how much you made your first job? Remember how much you made? One of my first jobs, Mickey D's, baby. Yes! Big Mac, tomatoes, lettuce on a sesame seed bun, right? Raking in $4.25 an hour. The wealth was just building tremendously. I remember my grandma telling me once that she used to make a quarter per hour. A quarter per hour. Wow, this is, again, raking in the wealth, right? Speaking of wealth, we talked about this last week. God isn't bothered with people who have money. Sometimes God blesses people with money. We even have examples in the Bible of people. There's Abraham and David and Solomon and Ruth and Lydia, just to name a few. If he was bothered by money, he wouldn't bless people financially. Here's a blessing, now I'm bothered by you. Here's a blessing, now I'm angry at you, right? It's not like that. Money is one of many tools God uses to help people provide for and bless their families. So, here's this thing, because we're in this series called What Would Jesus Undo? If God sometimes blesses people financially, and if it's a tool to provide and bless so that we can bless ourselves, bless our families, what would Jesus undo? What would he undo? We've already went over, he wouldn't undo money, he wouldn't undo wealth. He's not bothered by those things. Let's take a look at a story Jesus shares to gain a hint at what he'd undo. Jesus said that someone's land produced a really great harvest. He was already wealthy, so this was like icing on the cake. He's like, what am I going to do with all of my abundance? Where can I store it? Then he gets this idea. He's like, aha, I got it. I'm going to tear down all my barns. And I'm so wealthy now, I'm going to tear down all my barns. I don't even need those barns anymore. And I'm going to better ones, bigger ones. This is where I'll store my surplus. I will be set for years. It's time to party, to take it easy. Woohoo! It's time to have some fun, right? Listen into God's response. Luke 12. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And then Jesus says this. He's done with his story and he says this. And this is so important. You need to focus in on this part so that there's no misunderstanding. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich toward God. See, it's important to focus on Jesus' explanation so we don't accidentally get the wrong idea. Kind of like last week, some people think it says in the Bible that money is the root of all evil, and then they have this weird thought process or belief when it comes to God and money. The Bible doesn't say that. It says the love of money is the root of all evil. And it's the same thing here. We don't want to get the wrong idea. God's not saying, I'm the anti-fun Donnie Downer God. No fun for you. None of you. Right? He's not saying, you can never take it easy. Slave away your whole life. Retirement is terrible. He's not saying any of those things. The problem he had, listen in, again, it's in Jesus' explanation. The person was only, say the word only, they were only storing up for themselves, and they weren't rich towards God. What would Jesus undo? He'd undo not being rich towards God. He knew that if we were not careful, life would be about wealth building and always chasing for more and bigger barns and bigger cars and bigger this and better that. And he doesn't have a problem with any of those things, but he knew that could become the focus. And before you know it, someone could be wealthy in finances and poor in their relationship with God. That's why Jesus would undo not being rich towards God. This is why he encourages us to be rich towards him. One way to be rich towards God is to cultivate a deeper love by strengthening your relationship with him so that relationship is solid. We've been talking about this a lot, slowing down to spend time with him, to thank him, and so on. As I said last week, Jesus is far more worthy of our love than money. Money is something to be used. It's a tool. Jesus is someone who is worthy of love. He deserves our love, our thanks, our attention, our devotion, our loyalty. So I want you to think through for a minute. Think through either your daily schedule or your weekly schedule. What's one proactive way that you could spend time with God? I'm going to give a few, but I want you to think through your schedule. I'm going to give a few so it gets your mind going, but you think about it. It doesn't have to be the examples I'm giving, but maybe for some of you, you're just like the early bird. Like 4 a.m. is like 4 p.m. to you. God bless your soul if that's you, okay? But you just love the morning times. With 9 coffees, I'm assuming, right? Maybe it's just waking up just a few minutes earlier. Some of you are night owls. You're not even starting till 1 a.m., okay? So maybe it's going to bed a few minutes later. Maybe it's during your lunch break. You take a few minutes to connect with God, or maybe it's taking a walk in your neighborhood, or maybe it's cutting back a little on something like, okay, I'm going to watch one less, TV show tonight. I'm going to scroll a little bit less so I can give some time to God. Again, those are just examples, though. Think of some things through your week, because being rich towards God by having a stronger relationship with him can make life better for us as he continues to fill us with his peace and with his freedom. Now let's look at some verses just to continue to explore this thought process. Let's look at some verses in 1 Timothy. Like I shared last week, it's a letter Paul wrote to Timothy because Paul was his mentor. So as you're hearing these words, I want you to be thinking about, just picture yourself across from a table with Paul, and you guys are having coffee or eating a meal together, and he's mentoring you too. Let's look what it says in 1 Timothy 6. It says this: "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God." Guys, this is so cool. "Who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment." Now, when we read a verse like this, if you were sitting across from Paul right now at a table, you're like, "Paul, dude, I'm so thankful that you shared that with me, but guess what, dude? This doesn't apply to me. I'm not rich. I'm not rich, Paul. You're not talking to me. I don't have a top salary. I have like a decent home. It's not a great home. I don't have the latest and greatest of everything, Paul. Thank you for giving me this advice, but this doesn't apply to me. If anything, Paul, I'm just kind of average financially, or even below average." Yeah, keep this verse up, Adam. Actually, can you go back to the slide before? Yeah, okay. Notice it doesn't say, "those who are rich in this present San Diego." say those who are rich in this present America. You're like, PK, where are you going with this, bro? I'm so glad you asked because I'm going to share with you where I'm going with this, okay? Listen to this. Globally, because again, Paul's talking in a world context, not in a San Diego context, not even in an American context, okay? Globally, the average American standard of living, the average, not the American dream, white picket fence, I got the bigger mansion, I got the bigger car, the sports car, I got the latest and greatest, I got everything. Not the American white picket fence dream lifestyle. The average American lifestyle is considered wealthy when you compare it to the present world. Even those who live a modest American lifestyle often live in conditions that are considered affluent in numerous places globally. Not all, but most Americans are privileged compared to the world. Here's why I bring this up, because there's nothing wrong with that. We just talked earlier that God sometimes blesses. So if we live in a country where our average American lifestyle is a blessing, we don't need to feel bad about that. Here's why I bring it up. When Paul's talking to the rich, he's talking to us. He's talking to us. So we need to pay attention and let God speak to our hearts. Now, speaking of God, notice what Paul says about God. He richly provides for our enjoyment. He richly provides for our... We don't serve a stingy God. He isn't bothered by wealth. And whether he provides within and brings freedom within or outwardly, he wants us to enjoy life. Someone give an amen to that. He wants us to enjoy life. Paul would also say, while wealth is fine, he'd also mentor us to not be arrogant about it, as God hasn't blessed us to fill us with pride or to bring others down. He'd also encourage us, hey, don't put your hope in money. And it's not because it's bad. It's not because it's bad to have wealth. Don't put your hope in money because it's so uncertain. Look how, let me just give you some examples of how uncertain it can be. Everybody should raise their hand to this one. Ever had rent go up? Please, yes, okay. We breathe the wrong way and our rent goes up. And if you have a mortgage, you breathe the other way and your property taxes go up, right? It's like, it can be so uncertain. Have you ever misplaced your wallet or purse? And you're like, crap, the one time I carry cash, and I lose my wallet or purse, right? Ever had a financial setback, whether it's a job loss, something with your health that ends up costing money, or this one, car trouble. Car trouble. Why is every car trouble at least $500, right? Even tires nowadays are that much, right? Here's the thing. It's very important. Paul isn't being negative by pointing this out. But he realizes that negative things can happen financially. And that's why he encourages us not to put our hope in wealth, but to put our hope in God. Because he's always trustworthy. He's always faithful. He's always reliable. Again, like we just talked about, you can lose money. You can't lose Jesus. He's here and he's here to stay. He's someone that sticks closer than a brother. The Bible tells us that he's faithful when we're not faithful. Okay? So what else would Paul say to us? Listen in. It says this in the next couple verses. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. So again, what would Jesus undo? Again, he'd undo not being rich towards God. Wealth doesn't bother him, but he wants us to be rich towards God. Having a strong relationship with him, doing good and being generous is another way to be rich towards God. Now, I will bring up the awkward thing that sometimes people think, so we just get it out there. When a pastor or church brings up giving, it often gets a bad rap. And I get why. I really get why. I'll share what's maybe possibly going through your mind right now. Let me give an historical reason and a more modern reason why this can get a bad rap when it comes from a church. In the Middle Ages, not all, everybody say not all, okay, but some churches would sell indulgences. They'd sell indulgences, and all that meant was, would you give this church money, and by you giving money, we'll forgive you of your sins? Guys, it was a tragic and very sad misuse and abuse of money. Nothing to do with Jesus at all. You can't buy forgiveness. Jesus gives it for free through his grace, right? Don't ever let anybody tell you, whether it's money or good works, or if you do this or if you do that, it has nothing. You cannot buy Jesus' grace. It is there for free. It is something for us to receive. You can't buy it, you can't earn it through doing good, but there was some churches in the Middle Ages that would be like, if you pay us money, we'll forgive you of your sins. You did that, that's going to be a little bit higher. You did that on Saturday night, you're coming to church on Sunday, bro, that's going to be this much, right? It was a very tragic and sad misuse and abuse of money, and it totally distorted the grace of Jesus Christ, which is free to anyone. Now, let me give a more modern day example. Everybody again say not all, okay? Some TV preachers, not all TV preachers, just so you know, my grandfather came to Christ because of a TV preacher, okay? But in the 80s and 90s, some TV preachers would sell miracles and healings. Some of you maybe remember this, the late night owls that you have at 11:30 p.m. at night. They'd get on there and they'd be like, and it'd be so dramatic too, they'd close their eyes. I feel a healing coming. I just know it's coming. And for $49.95, get out your credit card right now. Whoever can get to the phone the fastest will get this healing baby. They'd even say Jesus, like he had lots of E's and S's. Jesus! In his name. For $49.95, of course, to my ministry, we will sell you miracles and healings. They'd sell like miracle towels and miracle oils, and God's powers, nothing that can be bought. God's generous. He gives us our power, or his power. So, guys, can I tell you, I among other things like this are why giving to a religious organization or institution can get a bad rap. I really, really do get it, and I just tried to share a couple of examples of why I get it. But I will also say this: misuse and abuse doesn't necessarily mean no use. The negative ways humans abuse money never negates the true and good principles God teaches us in the Bible about it. Because I want you to think about it. There's a lot of good that comes when someone is rich towards God through generosity. Or think for a moment, think of a church. And again, a church isn't a building, a church is full of people. Think of the good a church people can do, whether inside its four walls or in the city or in the world, when it's resourced through generosity from its people. And man, can I tell you, I love so much that at OB1, we don't just have to think about what it might look like to make an impact. We get to see the impact God is making. Some of you know this. We have consistent impact ministries like the San Diego Rescue Mission, to local heroes in our city, from postal workers to librarians to firefighters to anti-human trafficking ministry to loving on residents at a senior home. We have a couple impact weeks per year so that people that can't do consistent impact ministries can feel like they're still making an impact. We go into our world. We get into Brazil to make an impact. In fact, just this past week, Adam, you can put up the picture. Just this past week, our Impact Anti-Human Trafficking Ministry was one of the sponsors of a Thanksgiving fun night for survivors by providing crafts and games and activities. This is the team that went. For obvious reasons, you'll probably understand, we couldn't take pictures of the faces of the survivors, but that's the team that went. But honestly, one reason OB1 is rich in doing good, and we get to see the impact, is because of the generosity of those who call OB1 home. And you hear this from us often, but we really do mean it. For those of you who give financially, thank you. For those of you that give of yourself, give of your time, give of your talents to one of our OB1 ministries, thank you. It really does take finances and people to make an impact in our church and in our city. And speaking of impact, some of you have asked already, but our impact tree starts next week. Woohoo! There will be ornaments that will have opportunities on them to give to seniors, local heroes, survivors of exploitation, a family from OB Elementary just across the street, as well as Brazil. Now, if you take 5 ornaments, we'll forgive you of your sins. Okay? If you take 10, we might throw in a healing, okay? I'm just teasing, okay? No, seriously. If you want to be a blessing, no pressure. You know that's not what we're about at OB1. If you want to be a blessing, consider stopping by the table next week. You know, I want you to take a moment to think about something you're passionate about. I'm going to give a couple examples just to get your mind going, but like maybe for some of you, under-resourced kids that are fed well, that really gets, you're like, yeah, that's something that I'm passionate about. Maybe for some of you, bringing hope after natural disasters, that's something that you're passionate about. Or maybe mentoring someone that's just starting out. You're like, I remember the rigors of going through it for the first time. If I can mentor someone and they don't have to go through the pain that I've went through, guys, and it could be none of those or all of them. Just be thinking about what you're passionate about. There are many great causes out there today that someone can give to see their passions come to life. And even though that's a good thing, having so many options and needs, can it be overwhelming too? It's like, man, there's so many natural disasters. There's so many kids out there that are under-resourced. There's so many people that need mentoring. There's so many. Sometimes I think people want to be generous, but they're overwhelmed by the size of the need and just the vast quantity of needs out there. And they're like, I don't know where to start, so I'm just going to do nothing. They want to be generous, but there's just so much. Like, my dollar can't do anything. My time, my help, my talents, it can't do anything. If you're in that camp where you're like, I want to be generous because I have passions, I have things that God has called me to do good with, I hope this helps. I heard this from a pastor once, and it really helped me, and I hope it helps you too. He said this: do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. I'll say that again. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Guys, I love this. You can't do something for everyone, but you can do something for someone. And I already said it, but giving goes way beyond financial. We can give ourselves also. We can give our time. We can give our talents. So, again, I'm just going to give a few, but start thinking about some of your talents. Maybe something that and connect that to something you're passionate about. Just give an example, computer graphics. Maybe some of you are great at computer graphics, and there's a cause out there that you're passionate about. You could give your computer graphic talent to them every once in a while so they could get the word out about their cause. Some of you have an amazing mind. You just know how to think through things. You need to know how to plan through things. You can think through present problems with solutions. You can think of future things, and you could give that to a cause. Some of you, oh my gosh, you're so compassionate. You're so compassionate. You see a cat on a commercial and you start weeping because you're just so compassionate. Okay? You're just so compassionate. You could give that to someone or to some organization that you believe in their cause. Or like we talked about last week, knowing when to stop. Knowing when to stop. It's good to work and to build and to walk after goals, but we also have to know when to stop because all of us only have so much time. For some of you, like, my passion is my family, so I need to know when to stop so I can get home in a decent hour to be able to give to them. Whatever you're thinking, just think about some of your passions. You might not be able to do it for everyone, but you can do it for someone. A couple more things about giving and doing good. What if a key to being rich in good deeds, like Paul encourages us to do, is planning it out? What if that's a key? And here's what I mean by that. Maybe some of you are like, you know what, I really do want to be generous with my finances. Plan it out. Set aside a certain amount or a percentage. Just so you know, Robin and I do that. Besides our regular church giving, we set aside a certain percentage every paycheck so that if something comes along that hits our heart, we're not able to do everything, but we can do something as we set things aside. Or, again, giving of yourself. Maybe thinking about setting aside some time once or twice a month to give to a passion or a cause that you just, man, it just gets you right in your heart. You're like, I know I was meant to do something like this. Again, it's just something to think about. One other thought from Paul as you were sitting across from him at the restaurant or the table, he tells us that when we give, it helps us to take hold of the life to come. Now again, giving doesn't help us earn the life to come, right? Giving doesn't help us earn the life to come. Jesus earned and paved the way for us to have the life to come. But when we give, it reminds us that we're living for someone bigger. And it reminds us that we're living for something bigger. God, when I give, it's my way to be rich towards you. I'm living for you. And I know that someday I will live with you forever, face to face. Does giving help us earn that? Absolutely zero, never believe that lie once. Once. If you hear that, turn the TV off. If you hear that in the church, respectfully, walk out. But when we give, it reminds us, wow, God, you did so much for me. And because I love you back, I get to do things for you as well. I can't wait for the day where we get to talk about it face to face, how you used me on this earth to do good for you. What would Jesus undo? He'd undo not being rich towards God. He didn't have a problem with wealth, but he never wanted any of us to have a poor relationship with him. He wanted does anybody ever go into a marriage like, I hope it's poor? No, of course. Like, this is a good thing from Christ. Like, if you're engaged and someone says, you walk away too, right? It's the same with Jesus. Like, guys, he loves you so much. He loves you so much. Of course he'd want a strong relationship with you. But what's so cool is he gives us the choice. He guides us. Hey, there's nothing wrong with building wealth and having more and, having healthy money. But please don't let it become your focus where everything else in your life is poor. He wants a strong relationship with you. Jesus is so good, he doesn't even demand it. He died for it, but he doesn't demand it. Man, if I died for someone, I think I may do you remember? I'd come back to haunt them. Do you remember? Jesus doesn't do that. He died for us, but he never demands it. But he wants it. He wants a strong relationship with you. He wants a strong relationship with us. And he also wants us to make an impact with our lives by doing good and being generous. As we start to close, as Brianna comes back out to lead us in one final song, just some questions for you to contemplate either right now or maybe sometime this week or maybe even hopefully both. Adam, you can start putting them up. They're in your notes, but if you want to take a picture of the screen, that's fine as well. What's one area in your relationship with God that you feel is strong? You're like, yeah, I feel really good about this. What do you typically do to keep that strong? What's one area in your relationship with God that needs strengthened? Maybe what's something you can do this week to take a step towards strengthening it? And number 3, we talked about this. What's one way you can plan to be generous? There's tons of ways. How might you give your time and energy as a way to love God back? Number 5, what's something you're passionate about? Think about that. God built you different and unique for a reason. Your passions are different than my passions. Your heart is different than my heart. What are your passions? And how could you be intentional about giving toward your passion? Guys, Brianna, why don't you give them just two or so minutes just to, whether it's something that's on the screen, whether it's something that was talked about in the message, or even if it's something that wasn't talked about in the message. God's bigger than a message. But why don't you just take a couple minutes and connect with God? Maybe it's just telling him I love you all over again. Maybe it's just telling you appreciate that you didn't have to buy Jesus' grace, that it came freely to you. Or maybe it's one of these questions that God wants to connect with you about. Brianna, maybe about 2 minutes, and if you want to close us off. Love you guys.